Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Yud Beis Amar Aleph 12a of Maseches Kiddushin. We're 10 lines from the bottom of the page, and the first word on the line is kum. And in the middle of the page, the middle of the line, the Gemara says Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said, Shmuel made the following statement. Kidsha betamra, if a man is mekadesh, he betroths a woman with one date. Afilu, so he takes a date, the fruit, and he gives it to her at mekudeshesli, she accepts it. Afilu omed kur tmarim bedinar, even if a kur worth of dates, a kur is a measurement of volume, it's a large measurement, there's a lot of dates in a kur, and he says even if one kur costs a dinar, which would mean that each individual date costs less than a pruta. There are 192 prutas in a dinar. Apparently there are more than 192 dates in a kur. So if a kur worth of dates is a dinar, that means that each date is less than a pruta. Says Shmuel, even so, even though the date is worth less than a pruta, mikudeshes, she is betrothed. Why? Chayshinan shema shava pruta b'madai. We're concerned that maybe in a distant place such as Madai, Medea, where dates are not available, they need to be imported, they are much more expensive, perhaps in Madai or another place, the date is worth a pruta. And therefore Shmuel says, Mikudeshes, she's betrothed, because it might be worth a pruta somewhere else. Asks the Gemara, V'ha'anan tenan, but we learned in the Mishnah, Beis Hillel Amrin, Beis Hillel says, B'pruta, Uveshava pruta. Beis Hillel says that in order to have Kiddushin, it has to be worth either a pruta, or it either has to be a pruta, the actual cup or coin of a pruta or more, or it has to be a shava pruta. It has to be something that's worth a pruta. But these dates, they're not worth a pruta. Now, they might be worth a pruta somewhere else. Well, how could Shmuel say, mikudeshes, it works? Well, they might be worth a pruta, they might not be worth a pruta somewhere else. So how could Shmuel say, mikudeshes, she's betrothed? Says the Gemara lo kashya, it's not difficult, it's not a problem. Ha b'kiddushe vadai, ha b'kiddushe safek. Just to actually clarify that question one step further, the question is really because Shmuel seems to be saying that even if something is not a shava pruta, is not worth a pruta, well, we say still mikudeshes because it might be a pruta somewhere else. Right? It might be. Anything might be a pruta somewhere else. So that seems to be a contradiction or be contradicted by the Mishnah. The Mishnah says you need a shava pruta. It has to be worth, you have to know it's worth a pruta in order to have Kiddushin. Shmuel is saying, well, even if it's not worth it, well, since it might be worth a pruta somewhere else, it's still mikudeshes. That's a contradiction. Does it need to be worth a pruta or not? Or do we say even if it's not, maybe it is somewhere else? Says the Gemara, it's not a contradiction. Ha b'kiddushe vadai, ha b'kiddushe safek. We're talking about two different things. When the Mishnah says you need a shava pruta for Kiddushin, that's to have kiddushe vadai, to have a certain Kiddushin. That's a full-fledged Kiddushin that we treat as vadai. We treat as regular, Kiddushin that counts. Ha b'kiddushe safek. Shmuel was referring to kiddushe safek, where we have a safek, we have an uncertainty. What Shmuel was really saying is that any time you use shava kesef, something that has the value of money, that for Kiddushin, even if it's less than a pruta, we still treat it as a safek, because maybe it's worth a pruta somewhere else. And that's what Shmuel meant. It's a safek, we have to treat it like a safek, and therefore they should either do another Kiddushin to make sure that the first, to make sure that there's actually Kiddushin here, or they should give her a get. And if somebody in the meanwhile, before they do anything else, would try to be Mekadesh, then we'd have a major issue on our hands, because we wouldn't know who she's Mikudeshes to. If the first one really was worth a pruta somewhere else, she's Mikudeshes to the first guy. If it wasn't, then she wasn't Mikudeshes to him, she's Mikudeshes to the second guy. We don't know. It would be a major issue. So that's what Shmuel is saying, that we have to treat, anytime somebody uses a shava kesef, he's not using actual currency, he's using something that's of value, but the value where we are is less than a pruta, so we doesn't look like Kiddushin, but Shmuel is saying you have to be choshesh, you have to be concerned that maybe that item does have value somewhere else, and it could be Kiddushin. Says the Gemara, Hahu Gavra de'aktish, Hahu Gavra de'aktish bizavda de'urdi. There was a guy who was Mekadesh with Zavda de'urdi. Rashi tells us that it's like a pile or a clump of mochen, of like rags. A bunch of rags, basically. And he was Mekadesh, a woman with rags. Says the Gemara, what did they do? Yasiv Rav Shimi bar Chia kamei derav. But Rav Shimi bar Chia sat in front of Rav and he was he looked into it. And he said, what was he looking into? I ispa shava pruta in ilolo. And he was saying, if these rags are worth the shava pruta, then it's a Kiddushin's a good Kiddushin. If they're not, then it's not Kiddushin. Like we would have thought, it needs to be a shava pruta. Ask the Gemara of Yilespa shava pruta lo. And if it's not worth a pruta, no, it wouldn't be Kiddushin. What about Shmuel? V'ha'amar Shmuel chayshinon. Shmuel said that we're choshesh. We're concerned that it might be worth a shava pruta. So how could we say that if it's not worth a shava pruta, then it's not Kiddushin? Well, what about Shmuel? Shmuel says to be concerned that even though over here, yes, these rags aren't worth anything over here, but somewhere else, in a different place, they might be worth a shava pruta. We should be choshesh, we should be concerned that there's Kiddushin here. Says the Gemara, lo kashya, it's not a problem. Again, ha b'kiddushay vadai, ha b'kiddushay safek. One is talking about certain Kiddushin, and one is talking about uncertain Kiddushin. When Rav Shimi bar Chia said, if it's worth a shava pruta, it's Kiddushin, and if not, it's not, he didn't mean it's not at all. He meant it's not vadai Kiddushin. We're not going to treat it like a real Kiddushin, or a certain Kiddushin. We're going to have to, but what he meant was, rather, we'll have to treat it like a safek. That's all he meant. But he's aware of Shmuel, he agrees to Shmuel, and we just would have to, he wanted to know, is this Kiddushay vadai? Because it's for sure. You have to evaluate, how much are these rags worth? If they're a shava pruta here, then it's a real Kiddushin. If they are not, then it's a safek, because maybe they're worth something somewhere else. Ha'u gavra da'aktish ba'avna dekuchla. Another story of a man who was Mekadesh with a blue marble rock. He used his pet rock to be Mekadesh. Yasiv Rav Chisda v'kameshayre. And Rav Chisda took this rock. They brought it to Rav Chisda. They brought the shayla to him. I guess the same as with the mochen. They brought the rags. They said, what do we do? Is this Kiddushin or not? So they brought it to Rav Chisda this time. And they brought the rock. And kameshayre isbe shava pruta in v'ilolo. And he was evaluating if it's worth the shava pruta. If it's worth the pruta, then the Kiddushin's good. And if not, then it's not good. Ask the Gemara again, what do you mean? V'ilaspe shava pruta lo. If it wasn't worth a pruta, then we would say it's not Kiddushin, not even a safek, not even a possible Kiddushin. V'ha'amar Shmuel chayshinon. But Shmuel said that we're choshesh. Shmuel said that we're choshesh, we're concerned that maybe it is a good Kiddushin. Maybe this rock is worth something somewhere else. So here, the Gemara does not say what it said before. Here, the Gemara says, Rav Chisda lo savar le dishmuel. Rav Chisda doesn't hold of Shmuel. Rav Chisda doesn't hold of this idea that we're concerned that maybe it's not worth, maybe it's worth something somewhere else. He is not concerned about that. And that's why he said it's not a Kiddushin. Not because he didn't mean, like we said before, like we said in the previous answer, that it was uncertain. It was that's what he really meant. No. He meant it's not Kiddushin. He doesn't hold of Shmuel. He doesn't hold of the idea that we're choshesh. We're concerned that maybe it's worth something somewhere else. Why not? Why didn't he say the same answer? Tosfos deals with that. Says the Gemara, Amra le ime. So his mother said to him, I don't know if this means the Shmuel's mother or the mother of the person in the story, but someone's mother said to him, "V'ahu yoma dekadsha hava bei shava pruta." Says, what do you mean? It may be that today this rock is not worth a shava pruta, but the day that the Kiddushin took place, it was worth a shava pruta, and therefore they are married. So Amar La, so Rav Chisda said to her, Lav kol keminach dasar tla abasra. You do not have the ability to forbid him on someone else, on another person. In other words, what was going on here, as Rashi explains, is this wasn't such a simple case. The case was that first a man was mekadesh her with this blue rock. And then someone else came and was mekadesh her. So Shmuel said she's married to the second guy. The second guy used a full pruta or more. So Shmuel said the first one's not Kiddushin, it wasn't worth a shava pruta. The second one is Kiddushin. Sorry, not Shmuel, Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said the first one's not Kiddushin, the second guy is Kiddushin. She's married to the second guy. Along comes this woman, and she says, excuse me, but the day that the first Kiddushin took place, the rock was worth a shava pruta. So Rav Chisda said, you don't have the ability, your testimony doesn't have the power, you don't have the power to give testimony to now forbid this woman to the second husband. And he explained, he said, Lav Hainu, top of the next page. He's like, isn't this similar to the following story? Di Yehudis devisu de Rabbi Chia dahav yolat tsar leida. Yehudis, the wife of Rabbi Chia, would have difficult births. She used to give birth to twins. I guess it sounds like she had multiple sets of twins, and it was always painful. And she wanted to get out of her marriage. And she, instead of using, I guess, regular methods of trying to seek a get, maybe that hadn't worked, so she went a different direction. Amra le, she said to her husband, Rabbi Chia, she said, Amra li aim, my mother told me, Kabel beich avuch kiddushi kizutras, that your father accepted Kiddushin for you when you were young from someone else. And she told her husband, I'm sorry, we can't be married because I'm actually married to someone else. That's what she told Rabbi Chia. And how did she know that she was married to someone else? She said, my mother told me. So Amar La, so he said to her, Lav kol kamina de imech dasar tlech ilavai. It's not within your mother's power to forbid you on me. So, in other words, again, we have this scenario where there's a mother. I don't think it's specifically a mother. It's a single witness, not the person involved. If she said, I accepted Kiddushin, that would be a different story, perhaps. But in this case, it was the mother. It was someone else coming and trying to nullify in this case, the second marriage, and say the first marriage was good. That was also the case of the rock. She was saying the second marriage is no good. The first marriage was actually good with the rock. Says Rav Chisda, this one witness doesn't have the ability to do that. Amrei Rabbanan le Rav Chisda. The Rabbanan said to Rav Chisda, Amai, why are you saying what you're saying? Why are you insisting, back to the case of the blue rock, why are you insisting that she was not married to the first guy, that she's only married to the second guy? You're saying the rock is not worth a shava pruta, and so she wasn't married to the first guy. They said to him, Amr li Rabban Rav Chisda, Amai ha'ika sa'adi be'idis diyadi dibahu yuma havabe shava pruta. There are witnesses, besides for the mother in this case, there are witnesses in Idis, which is another place. They said, they're not here anymore, they left, but there are witnesses who say that can testify that indeed it was worth a shava pruta on that day. So they said, the Rabbanan said to Rav Chisda, fine, this woman on her own is not believed, but we have two valid witnesses who can testify that it was worth a shava pruta. They're just out of town during Iddis. So he said back, Hashta miha lesnehu. He said, but at the end of the day, right now, they're not here. So it's very nice that there are witnesses somewhere, but they're not here. There's no testimony here. It doesn't help to have witnesses that you're telling me that there's witnesses somewhere else. At the end of the day, we don't have them here. We don't have their testimony. It doesn't make a difference. And then he went on and he said again, Lav hainu d'Rabbi Chanina. Again, he backed his ruling up with another example. He's like, isn't this the same as Rabbi Chanina? De'amar Rabbi Chanina. That Rabbi Chanina said, in the following case. The case was, it's a Gemara in Ksubos, the daughters of Shmuel were captured and taken captive. And they were freed. And they came to the Beis Medrash of Rabbi Chanina. And the question was, are they considered, do we assume that they were violated by their captors? Do we have to assume that? Because they were saying they weren't. What's in certain instances we would say there's a chazaka, there's an assumption that they were. So what's the halacha? So the women said that they're Torah. They said nothing happened to us. And the question would really be if they were allowed to marry a Kohen. Because a Kohen would be forbidden to them if they were violated by the captors. So the women said, they claim that nothing happened and they're permitted. So Rabbi Chanina ruled that they're permitted. So they asked Rabbi Chanina, I guess the other rabbis there, the other sages, they said, but there are witnesses in Medina Sayam, in a far off place, and those witnesses saw that they were captured. And the halacha is that once you have witnesses that they've been captured, then even if she says that the woman says nothing happened to me, but she's not believed, there's an assumption that if they were taken, that they were violated. And so in this case, there were no present witnesses that they were actually captured even. There was nobody testifying that. I guess it's like we had a sort of pesha asar pesha hitter. We knew it perhaps from them that they had been captured, but they also said they were tahora, they were okay, they weren't violated. And but the claim was, but there are witnesses that they were captured. So, and the halacha is if there's witnesses that they were captured, then we assume that they were violated and they should be forbidden to marry a Kohen, or a Kohen should be forbidden to marry them. He should have to be concerned that they are no longer, that they were violated. So what did Rabbi Chanina say? So that's where our Gemara picks up. It says, De'amar Rabbi Chanina said, Eideha b'tzad astan b'teyaser. The witnesses are in the b'tzad astan. It's in the northern hemisphere. They're in the north, and she's going to be forbidden. You could tell me there's witnesses from today till tomorrow. Saying that there's witnesses is not the same as a testimony. And unless those witnesses come and present their testimony, then we don't assume that there is a testimony. And so, therefore, Rabbi Chanina ruled that they're allowed to marry a Kohen. So Rav Chisda said the same thing over here. Rav Chisda said, you are claiming that there are witnesses that know that this rock was worth a shava pruta on the day of the Kiddushin, and that she's really married to the first guy. But saying that there's witnesses is not enough. The witnesses have to be here. They have to be here to give testimony, and we don't have to be concerned for this possibility until they actually give their testimony. Gemara continues, it says, Abaye v'Rava lo sira lahu lahad Rav Chisda. Abaye and Rava did not hold of Rav Chisda, they did not agree with him, and what they disagreed with was his proof. He tried to bring a proof from the case of the captive, of Shmuel's daughters who were taken captive, and there we say that that potential witnesses is not enough. So why do they disagree with that? Why wasn't that considered a good example, a good proof? The Gemara says, Im hikilu b'shvuya deminav lanafsha gabe shavai nekel be'eshes ish. They said there's an added reason that we can assume that they weren't violated. Because the idea, it sounds like what he's saying is, in the first place, the idea that we assume that they were violated is already something, I guess, that's novel, that's not so pashut, not so obvious. They said, by a shvuya, by a captive, she's minavla nafsha gabi shavai. She makes herself repulsive to the captor, to resist, to hold him back, so that he doesn't violate her. So maybe over there, where there's this added reason to assume that nothing happened, maybe there we'll say that unless you have the specific witnesses, we're not going to forbid them from marrying a Kohen. But over here, says the Gemara, over here, Nekel Be'eshes Ish will be lenient when it comes to Eshes Ish, to the prohibition of being with a married woman. So here it's a different story, and here there's no added svara, there's no added logic to justify why the rock wasn't worth the shalabruta that day. Meaning, if there are witnesses somewhere, we know that there's witnesses somewhere, we have to be concerned now, and they're testifying that the rock itself was worth the shalabruta, or they have a testimony. So that we have to be concerned about. The testimony in the case of the captives, even if they would be here, we would accept it, but it's already like a little bit of a jump, because over there, they're just testifying that she was captured, and yes, we assume that if she was captured, then something happened, but even that is novel, because who says that something happened to her? Maybe, it's normal for her to make herself repulsive and make herself not be violated. So yeah, we assume it, but to say we assume that she was violated, and we're going to assume that there's a claim that there are witnesses, that we're going to also be choshish for that, so that's already multiple steps. The fact that we're not concerned in that case is not a proof that we won't be concerned in the case of this Kiddushin, where there was a Kiddushin with this blue rock, which there are apparently witnesses to the fact that it was really worth a shavapruta, and that she was married to the first guy. The Gemara explains, the Gemara says that Ishta'er me'ahi mishpacha besura. There were remnants of that family, descendants of that family in Surah. Upirshu Rabbana Mina. And the sages stayed away from marrying that family. Meaning, this woman, remember, she originally had Kiddushin from one guy, and it was with this blue rock. Rav Chisda said it's not Kiddushin. And in the meanwhile, then she went and married someone else. So Rav Chisda said, that's fine. The first one wasn't Kiddushin, she's married to the second guy. But the other sages are saying, well, we're not so sure about that. And maybe she was married to the first guy, which means the second guy is Eshes Ish, it's adultery, and the children are mamzerim. So the Rabbanan, the sages, stayed away from marrying that family. It wasn't because they held of Shmuel. Shmuel held that that we have to be choshesh that the original Kiddushin was good, that blue rock, because maybe somewhere else the blue rock is worth something. That was Shmuel's idea, that Shema Shavapruta B'madai, maybe in Medea or somewhere else it's worth something. That was Shmuel. Says the Gemara, the sages, they weren't concerned about Shmuel's opinion. No, they agreed apparently that we don't paskin like Shmuel. We're not choshesh, we're not concerned that maybe it's worth something somewhere else. We go by what it's worth here. But even here, there was a question about it, and there were apparently witnesses somewhere that knew that it really was worth the Shavapruta. They held like Abaye and Rava, and Abaye and Rava said that we do have to be concerned for those witnesses. And you can't compare it to the case of Shmuel's daughters who were taken captive, where we weren't concerned about potential witnesses. In this case, you do have to be concerned for the witnesses. We are concerned that it was worth the Shabbat. We're concerned that she was married to the first guy, and therefore not married to the second guy, and the children of this from that second marriage are mamzerim, and that's why the sages refrained from marrying into the descendants of this family. Okay, the Gemara has another story. Ahu gavra de'aktish b'shutisa de'asa b'shuka. There was a man who betrothed a woman with a myrtle branch, an arava, in the shuk, in the market, in public. Shalfa Rav Acha bar Huna l'kamed Rav Yosef. I guess not just in public, but in the shuk itself. We do Kiddushin in public, so it seems like that the problem isn't in public so much. It's going to be, well, as we'll see, to do it in the shuk, to do it in the marketplace. Shalcha Rav Acha bar Huna l'kamed Rav Yosef. Rav Acha bar Huna sent a message to Rav Yosef, ki agavna mai. What's the halacha? What's the halacha? This Kiddushin was A, with a myrtle branch, and B, it was done in the shuk. What's the halacha? It was done in the market. Shalach lei. So he said to him, you know what you have to do? Rav Yosef responded, Nagde karav. First of all, you have to give this man a flogging, like the opinion of Rav, as we'll speak in a moment. He was out of line for doing this. Ve'atzrich gita kishmuel. And also we require a get like Shmuel. Because remember, Shmuel is the one who says that we're choshesh, that maybe it's worth something. So really, it seemed this myrtle branch was not worth the Shabbat Pruta. But Shmuel says you have to be concerned that maybe it is. So we have to be choshesh, we have to be concerned that maybe the Kiddushin was good, like Shmuel, and therefore will require a get. And we'll also give this guy lashes, a flogging, because of his immodest behavior. De Rav mangid al, because Rav would give a flogging, a punishment. The court would enact a punishment for the following types of actions. Al de mekadesh b'shuka. If somebody did kiddushin in the shuk, in the marketplace, that was considered a pritzus, a lack of modesty, or worse. And Rav would hold that if you did kiddushin in the shuk, he would give the person a flogging. Ve'al de mekadesh b'biyah. And somebody who did kiddushin with biyah, one of the three things in the Mishnah, we mentioned this right at the beginning, this Gemara, that Rav teaches us that it's actually forbidden to do kiddushin with biyah. It's considered pritzus, it's considered a breach of modesty. Ve'al de mekadesh b'lo shiduchi. And somebody who would do kiddushin without a shidduch, meaning without first arranging it, without first meeting, and just walk up to a woman and be mekadesh, that was considered also a breach of tznius. Ve'al de mavtil gita, and also someone who would nullify his get, if he would send a get, a divorce bill, to his wife by way of a messenger, and then he would say, and then he would try to nullify it. He would nullify it and say it's batal. And meanwhile, people may not know that it was batal, and it was nullified, and the shliach might still give it to her, and she will think that she's divorced, and she'll get remarried, and that's obviously a major issue. So it's a major issue for someone to be mevatel, to nullify his get, and Rav, if somebody would do that, Rav would punish him with a flogging. Val demasar modah gita, and also someone who would announce a modah, protest of his get, and say that it was ma'usa, that it was forced on me. After the fact, he would say that, and again, that causes major potential issues. So that also Rav would be mangid. He would give a flogging for that. Ve'al demitzar shlucha d'Rabbanan, and someone who would treat the shliach of Beis Din improperly. Rashi says they would beat him up. If Beis Din gives someone a summons, they send their messenger to give him a summons, and you say, I'm not coming, and you beat up the messenger, so that also Rav would punish him. I think I saw Tosfos says that it's a Tosfos elsewhere, I think, but that's obvious. If you would beat him up, he would be punished. But even if you would just verbally abuse the messenger, also then Rav would punish that man for that and give him a flogging. Ve'al dechala shamta ilave tlasing yomin, and on someone who was excommunicated for 30 days, and he didn't try to improve his behavior and didn't try to work it out with the beis din, and he continued in his ways, he would also deserve a flogging. Ve'al chasna dedayer bechamua, and on a son-in-law who would live in his in-law's house, and the concern is that he might have relations with his mother-in-law. And the Gemara says, "Dedayer in cholif lo." It breaks singing. It says, if he lives there only, but if he just passes by, then it's okay. There was a certain son-in-law who was passing by the gates of his mother-in-law's house. V'nagdei Rav Sheshes, and just for walking by, Rav Sheshes gave him lashes. Rav Sheshes gave him a flogging. So we see, it's not just living there; it's also just walking by. So the Gemara says, "Ahu meidam havas daima chamsemine." Now that was different. There was already suspicions going around about this mother-in-law and this son-in-law, and that's why just for walking by, Rav Sheshes said that's a breach of tznius. That's a breach, and gave him a flogging. In any event, we have all these different scenarios where Rav would give the person lashes for behaving in these ways, and the Gemara is saying this goes back to the case that we're dealing with. In our case, there was the man who was Mekadesh in the Shuk. He betrothed in the marketplace with the myrtle branch, and Rabbi Yosef said, okay, according to Rav, he should get a flogging for that breach of tznius for doing Kiddushin out in the marketplace. The Gemara says, Neherdai Amri, the people of Neherda reported, Bekulu lo mangid Rav. No, they had a different tradition. Rav was not giving lashes for all of these different behaviors. He did not give lashes on these. Ella al de mekadesh bebia below shiduchi. Just for one of them. One very specific one. Mekadesh bebia, someone who did Kiddushin with intercourse. And not only that, but below shiduchi, specifically where there wasn't a previous arrangement. If a man would go right up to a woman and say, will you do Kiddushin with me through bia? That was considered a breach of tznius. But if they arranged it in advance, they arranged the shidduch, then it would be okay. That's what the people of Neherda said. The ikadamri, but some say vafilu b'shiduchi nami mishum pritus. No, even with the arrangement before, that wouldn't help. Even there, Rav would be mangid. He would give a flogging, because even if it's arranged before, but just the very act of doing Kiddushin through bia was considered a breach of tznius, considered a pritzus, and Rav would give a flogging for that. But according to the Nerdai, all the other things no. And so in the case of being Mekadesh Bashuka, that would not, doing Kiddushin in the Shuk, that would not deserve a flogging according to this. Now obviously, times have changed. We are not flogging people for these behaviors, but it's still, the ideas of what's tznius, what's not, what's proper, are also still relevant, and I guess even the case of the mother-in-law, I'm not sure if that Gemara was talking about a specific scenario, whether the daughter-in-law wasn't there or not. I'm not sure. I didn't have a chance to look into it, but and obviously the practice nowadays is that people go to their in-laws and spend time in their in-laws. But I guess that's still still a valuable lesson about being careful with relationships. All right, we'll hold there, and we will resume Emut Hashem next Sunday.